The hype is real. Our childhoods have been saved. X-Men 97 is the best show ever! That was my impression of the comic book collecting market, because based off of what has been going on, with sales on eBay in the wake of this new animated series returning to Disney+, I mean, it is X-Men fever everywhere. So in this video, I want to go through kind of, what's going on with the show, talk a little bit about the secondary market movement, focus in on the key collector trending 20 list, and then ultimately talk about where I see these books going in the future. But of course, before I get into the video, if you guys could like, comment, subscribe, I appreciate it. Helps support the channel doing those things. But let's get into this video here today. Now here you guys see X-Men 97. I mean, you have to be living under a rock to not have heard about this show, debuting on Disney+. We're now 3 episodes in. It's been going on for about 2 weeks. And this is one of those shows that even my friends who don't collect comic books, who aren't big, Marvel MCU fans, I've been getting the WhatsApp text. I've been getting the text as like, hey, Mickey, you know comic books. Like, have you checked out this show? Remember this show? And it just makes you realize that this is probably the effect that they thought the show would have, where it's going to bring back all of these comic fans and collectors who have churned on the hobby and the MCU. And all you have to do is point to the movement of the secondary market to basically validate that thesis. It seems as though people are coming back and looking at the X-Men books once again. And what's particularly interesting about the list, which of course I'm going to cover and talk about the books that are actually moving, is that it really does seem like this past episode that featured Mr. Sinister and of course Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen, really got the market going crazy. I mean, when we had X-Men 97 do its return last week, X-Men Adventures, first appearance of Morph, and then the comic book that was, based off of the show, that particular book had a lot of movement to it, but not quite at the level that we're seeing with this week. And I think that has to do with the fact that, people were excited about the show, but once the show actually came out and they were like, saw the first couple episodes and they were like, oh, this is actually really, really good. Now people are starting to pull the trigger on some of those purchases, and a lot of those triggers being pulled are on the books for Mr. Sinister and, of course, Madeline Pryor, the Goblin Queen. Now, I don't know what it is, about people wanting to collect the Goblin Queen. I mean, when I look at images of her, I just can't really understand it. What is it about having a scantily clad Jean Grey in vampire attire that makes people want to buy her covers? I just... Maybe in the comments you guys can let me know, because this is one that I've been scratching my head with. I mean, comic book collectors, I mean, who would have thought that they would have liked, a character drawn this way? But here we are. So let's take a look at the trending 20 list from Key Collector. Of course, these are the 20 books that have moved the most, had the most increase in sold sales this last week. And, not a list that I normally cover, but something I wanted to show to you guys. I'm sure if we pulled up cover prices list, it would just show similar results. But the point I'm trying to make to you here is that of the 20 books right here, we have 11 that are actually X-Men related. Starting with this classic right here, of course, X-Men number 239, the first cover appearance of Mr. Sinister. I believe this is also maybe the first cover appearance of the Goblin Queen. I could also be wrong with that. This is not actually her first appearance in the comic book, but when we're talking about a 1-2 punch, collectible cover that people want to have on their shelf, I mean, this is about as good as it gets, at least with these two characters. This is a book that always sells, really. I mean, it's always had a ton of movement in the market. There's always been demand, and especially in this last week, I mean, scroll, here we go. All of the books selling in the last week right here in anticipation for the show. And we actually got a lot of high sales right here. Look at 9/8 selling for $175, which is definitely a lot higher than what it was selling for, say a few months ago. I mean, not everything is absolutely blowing it up. Of course, grade comes heavily into play with this type of book, this type of cover, but it's always been one where, a near mint copy of it, you could get that $15, $20. Here you see $30 right there. Pretty high sales, $25 for the 2-stack, $25 for this book right here. I mean, this is always one that, if you're a dollar bin diver, this is always a good one to keep your eye out for. 686% increase in copies sold just because of the cartoon, which again, that's a whole other conversation. It's very rare that cartoons have, secondary market moving effects on them. Usually it's got to be live action to kind of have any ripple into the secondary market. And there's very few exceptions like Into the Spider-Verse that actually can have this effect. But I think what we're sort of seeing is that, X-Men are just that popular. Spider-Man is just that popular. So when you do get the cartoon versions of these characters, those can have market implications as well. Now, we also had Uncanny X-Men Annual number 17, first appearance of this character, Executioner. Now, this was one that was a deep cut for me. Even I didn't know who the Executioner was when I saw him pop up in the show, and I certainly didn't know about this book either, but this apparently is his first appearance right here. Not a book that is terribly expensive, but certainly one that all of a sudden, if you had this in your eBay store sitting there for like 5 years, you woke up that morning with a sale and you were like, what the hell? This book actually sold? And that happened many times over because 567% increase in this book. Now, of course, this character is not going to be the future event crossover villain that we're all going to be super excited about. I mean, I'm not even convinced that this character is going to show up in the show from here on out. But hey, people wanted to get their book and they got it. You got X-Men 256 right here. This is the debut of the classic Psylocke costume, up 375%. I mean, this is another one. We did see Morph kind of turn into Psylocke. I mean, maybe they're going to incorporate her in the show. Then you have this one right here, Uncanny X-Men 168. This is the actual first appearance of Madeline Pryor, who later becomes the Goblin Queen. We got a Canadian price variant at the 9.8 level, sell for $640. I believe that might have been a record. $450 in 2022, up 42%. That's pretty crazy. 282% increase in sales for this book. Now, again, it could all be relative. 282 could be, we went from 1 sale to 3 sales, but that's not really the case. At least if you go into eBay and you look for it, you do see a flurry of sales coming in. Uncanny X-Men number 213, classic Wolverine Sabretooth cover right there. I do actually believe that this is their first fight, which makes it kind of significant in that way. I could be wrong on that, but Key Collector has it as Betsy Braddock, who of course is Psylocke, joins the X-Men, and then it's the first cameo appearance of Mr. Sinister, so also making this book pretty exciting for them. You have Avengers Annual number 10, first appearance of Rogue, first cover of Mystique. This, of course, is a classic book. Everyone is excited to see Rogue return in X-Men 97. Everyone's anticipating that Rogue's going to have a big role in the MCU X-Men team moving forward. So this will be a book that, later on I'm going to talk about once I get through the list. You have Wolverine number 75 right here. You got the interaction with Wolverine and Magneto. I think people just excited about, the 97 characters, and that's another reason to move that book. You have X-Men number 24, of course, the Rogue Gambit Kiss cover that everybody loves. I mean, this is the relationship that we all grew up watching, and that relationship now has some juicy twists and turns in introducing Magneto into it. You have X-Men number 1, of course. This is the one that is also most related to the show that, frankly, if we wanted to talk about it, X-Men number 1 is the most moving book next to Spawn number 1 every single week, every single year, throughout the entire history of comic books since this book has come out. I mean, every single hot list could just put X-Men number 1 at the top if they wanted to be 100% honest with what's going on in the movement, secondary market. Uncanny X-Men number 266, of course, you have the quote-unquote first appearance of Gambit. A lot of people talk about the annual book. I mean, does it really matter? This is the one that everybody wants, guys. Like, we call it the second appearance. Who cares? This is the one that people want to own. And, first appearance is just the name, right? It doesn't actually mean that it has to be the one that is more expensive. This is the one that is more expensive. Also seeing a lot of movement in the market. And then finally, you have Uncanny X-Men number 221, the first appearance of Mr. Sinister. Always a book that is, is a key that people like, but there's a lot of copies out there. So it's always hard for this book to surpass that $75 price point. That $100 price point right here for a 9.4 seems like a decent deal. But this is one that obviously in the wake of this show also had a ton of sales out there in the secondary market. A 9.8 going for a slash price of $325, which of course is not anywhere near what this book was selling for, in the height of COVID. But, as far as getting books a little more liquid, getting people to, finally pull the trigger on some of those, listings that they've been watching online. The show has really done it for a lot of these books. Now, I wanted to kind of finish out with a couple of these books right here, Avengers Annual number 10 and Uncanny X-Men 266, probably the more bona fide keys, first Gambit, quote unquote, and first Rogue. Let's just zoom into the 9/8s and do a little bit of a review of where they're currently sitting at. 9,472 universal copies for this book right here. At the 9/8 level, we have 924, a 9/8 rate of 10%. So not the easiest book to get in 9/8 condition, but at the same time, there are a lot of this book out there. I mean, we have 9,000 graded copies. There's probably, 50,000 raw copies out there in the wild. But this is a book that currently, last few sales, 700, 706, 749, 570 right here at auction, slash price of $850. So this is one that, I'm still of the mind, especially when you talk about the comic book index, that, maybe there still is a little bit of froth on this one. Depends on when you buy it. I mean, again, you have to remember that there's so many raw copies that there's always going to be, supply coming into the market at all times. But we have seen this book slowly go up over time. But of course, it went crazy in COVID at $2,000. And now kind of where it sits, around that $700 range, might still be a little high, all things considered. I mean, if you look at this auction, $570, that's probably the true floor. So if you're somebody out there who really wants to buy it, I mean, I would not be buying this for more than that $500 level. In fact, if I were you, I would really just look for a high grade raw and try to get the 9/8 myself. Similarly, Uncanny X-Men 266, right here we have 21,000 universal copies right there. 9/8 level, 3,732, a 9/8 rate of 17%. This one is definitely an easier book to find at this 9/8 level, which is one of the reasons why it's so hard to keep it, at an elevated value, because there's always raw copies being graded and being injected into the supply. This book's shooting up all the way to, $1,100 once upon a time. Now, recently, it's been selling at that $650 level or so. I mean, if we go back to 2020, it was a $400, maybe $500 book. That's probably a price I would feel more comfortable spending for this one. But again, if it were up to me, if I was someone that needed the 9/8, I would be looking for high grade raws and trying to get it myself. In fact, actually, if you're somebody who this is your favorite character right here with Gambit, I would probably look to, maybe getting a newsstand of this one, or getting a newsstand marked jeweler, if that's your type of thing. But again, you got to be a little bit careful with newsstand marked jewelers when it comes to CGC grades, as we've learned recently in the wake of all of the grading stuff. Anyways, that was my little video talking about X-Men 97, giving a little bit of a market report. What do you guys think about the show? What do you guys think about all these X-Men books? I mean, you have to be a little bit careful. Don't FOMO into them. They're Copper Age books. You can find these ones out there. They always pop up in collections. But hey, a lot of people very excited about the show. And I have to think that, for the remainder of the season, as episodes continue to come out, I would not be surprised if there was still a lot more X-Men movement to come. I think that people are really invested in the show, and I think that the casual comic fan is being brought back into this world and looking to make some of those purchases on eBay. Anyways, that's all I got for this one. Let me know what you guys think. Like, comment, subscribe. See you on the next video.